Before we begin, make sure you're somewhere quiet. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. Because the stories you're about to hear aren't just scary. These are the kinds of experiences people don't talk about. If you enjoy true horror stories, unsettling encounters, and disturbing events that happen to real people, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. I didn't believe in God when this happened. I still don't. But I believe something was listening. The church was supposed to be temporary work. Just a clean-up job. An old countryside chapel scheduled for demolition, abandoned for years after the congregation dwindled to nothing. The city hired a small crew to clear out remaining furniture, document anything valuable, and make sure no one was squatting inside. I volunteered for the overnight shift because it paid extra. That decision still wakes me up at night. The church sat far from town, surrounded by trees and an empty gravel lot. No streetlights. No nearby houses. Just a narrow road that disappeared into the woods. From the outside, it looked peaceful. Almost beautiful. White paint peeling softly. Tall stained glass windows dark and opaque. A bell tower that hadn't rung in decades. Inside, the air was heavy. Not dusty, stale. Like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time and didn't appreciate being disturbed now. My job was simple: catalog items in the main hall and basement, lock up, and wait until morning. I was alone. Also, I thought. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Churches amplify everything. Every footstep echoed longer than it should. Every movement felt louder, more exposed. I kept thinking I heard someone breathing behind me, but when I stopped, the sound stopped too. I tried to ignore it. I worked my way through the pews, tagging hymnals, old donation boxes, broken furniture. Everything felt out of order. Not messy, intentionally placed. As if the church had been abandoned mid-service and frozen in time. The pulpit still had notes on it. Yellowed pages. Handwritten. The date at the top made my stomach tighten. It was from the night the church officially closed. The final sermon. I read a few lines. They weren't comforting. They weren't hopeful. They were warnings. Not metaphorical ones. Direct ones. Do not stay after the doors close. Do not answer voices that are not called. If you hear singing when no one is present, leave. I laughed under my breath and put the notes back. Basements creep everyone out. That's just how it is. But church basements feel worse: low ceilings, narrow staircases, and the sense that you're going somewhere you're not meant to be. The light switch worked, barely. Flickering bulbs buzzed overhead as I descended. That's when I saw the chairs. They were arranged in neat rows. Facing a blank wall. Not storage. Not random. A congregation. In front of the chairs stood a small wooden podium. Someone had been holding services down there. Recently. I felt that pressure in my chest, the one that tells you to leave without explaining why. Then I heard singing. Soft. Low. Off-key. A single voice at first, humming a hymn I recognized from childhood. I froze. The sound came from above me. From the main hall. I shut the basement door and locked it. My hands were shaking too badly to hold my phone steady, but I tried calling my supervisor anyway. No signal. No bars. The singing stopped. Then came footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Crossing the church floor. Then another set. Then another. They didn't rush. They didn't whisper. They walked like they knew where they were going. The basement door handle rattled. Once. Twice. Then a voice spoke through the wood. Clear. Calm. Familiar. It was my name. I didn't answer. I backed into the corner, holding a broken chair leg like it could save me. The voice sighed. "We don't do sermons without everyone present," it said. Something heavy hit the door. Not a slam. A lean. Pressure. As if multiple people were resting their weight against it. Then came the chanting. Not Latin. Not English. Rhythmic. Repetitive. Memorized. The bulbs overhead started flickering faster. The air felt thick, like breathing through cloth. I don't remember deciding to run. I just remember the basement door suddenly opening, not outward, but inward, collapsing as if it had been pulled apart from the hinges. I sprinted past shapes in the darkness, up the stairs, toward the exit. The front doors were locked. The pews were full. People sat silently, facing the pulpit. Their heads turned toward me all at once. Their mouths opened. And they sang. Perfectly. In unison. The last thing I remember before passing out was the bell tower ringing. Once. I woke up in the hospital. They told me I was found on the road, barefoot, miles away from the church. Dehydrated. Bruised. No explanation. The church was demolished 2 weeks later. The workers refused to go inside. Said they heard singing during the day. Said the bells rang by themselves at night. The final report said something strange. The pulpit was missing. So were the basement chairs. And written on the inside of the front doors, carved deep into the wood, were the words, "Service is not over." I was never supposed to be alone that night. That's important. The church required at least 2 clergy members on site during late services. It was a safety rule, put in place years earlier after an incident no one liked to talk about. But Father Matthew was sick, and the bishop approved a one-night exception. I volunteered to stay. I'd been a priest for 6 years by then. Long enough to know how quiet churches could get after midnight. Long enough to know how confessions worked. Or at least, how they were supposed to work. The church itself was old, stone walls, narrow stained glass windows, heavy wooden doors that absorbed sound instead of echoing it. At night, the building felt sealed off from the world, like stepping inside a held breath. The final confession hour began at 11:30 p.m. Late, even by church standards. Only one candle was lit in the sanctuary. The rest of the lights were dimmed, leaving long shadows across the pews. I took my seat inside the confessional booth, closed the door, and waited. For a long time, no one came. I was just considering ending the session early when I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Heavy. Someone entered the church. I cleared my throat and announced myself, reminding whoever it was that confessions were still open. The footsteps stopped. Then resumed, closer now. The confessional door opened on the other side. Someone sat down. I couldn't see them. The screen between us allowed only a silhouette. "Bless me, Father," the voice said. It was calm. Male. Rougher than most. "For I have sinned." I replied automatically, the words coming from habit rather than thought. "How long has it been since your last confession?" A pause. "I don't remember," the man said. Time works differently here. That should have been my first warning. People ramble in confessions. They avoid details. They exaggerate guilt. But something about his tone, too steady, too deliberate, made my skin prickle. I asked him to continue. He did. He began listing things that weren't sins. Small observations. "I notice you lock the side door twice," he said. "You hesitate before saying certain prayers. You don't believe what you say anymore." My mouth went dry. Confessions weren't supposed to be personal in that direction. "I think you're mistaken," I said carefully. The man chuckled. "I don't think so, Father." I shifted in my seat. "I came here to confess," he continued, "but not the way you expect." I asked him to state his sins. There was another pause. Then he said, "I've listened." The candle flame flickered violently. "To what?" I asked. "To everything," he said. "Every whisper. Every confession. Every lie said in this room." I told him this was inappropriate and suggested we end the session. He leaned closer to the screen. "I know what you told God," he said. "And what you didn't." My heart started pounding. I stood up, intending to leave the booth. "Sit," he said. I froze. I don't know why. The authority in his voice didn't feel human. It wasn't loud or threatening. It was final. "You see," he continued, "people think confession is private. That's the mistake. Words said here don't disappear." I demanded to see his face. He declined. Instead, he began reciting confessions. Not his. Mine. Things I'd never spoken aloud. Thoughts. Doubts. Moments of anger. Regret. Details no one else could know. My hands trembled so badly I had to sit back down. "How do you know this?" I whispered. He sighed. "We keep records." I heard movement outside the booth. Footsteps. Multiple. Soft, careful. Circling. I realized then the church wasn't empty. I asked him who we were. He answered by sliding something beneath the screen. A rosary. One I recognized. It belonged to Father Matthew. He confessed earlier, the man said. He lied. I tried to stand again. This time, the confessional door behind me wouldn't open. The footsteps stopped. The man's voice softened. "You don't need to be afraid," he said. "You're almost forgiven." The lights in the church went out. Total darkness. The only sound was breathing, not just mine. All around me. Whispering began. Not chanting. Repeating. Confessions. Hundreds of them. Layered. Overlapping. Endless. I screamed. The door burst open. I stumbled out into the sanctuary, empty, dark, silent. The confessional booth behind me was empty. No man. No rosary. No sign anyone else had been there. The next morning, Father Matthew was reported missing. No one ever found him. I left the priesthood 6 months later. I don't enter churches anymore. But sometimes, when I pass one at night, I swear I hear murmuring through the walls. And I know better than to listen. Church sleepovers were supposed to be harmless. That's what the adults kept saying. Bonding, they called it. A way to keep teenagers out of trouble. Pizza, games, prayer, sleeping bags spread across the fellowship hall floor. I was 16 when my parents made me go. The church was old, not ancient, but old enough that parts of it felt forgotten. Long hallways. Locked rooms no one ever explained. A basement everyone joked about but never used. We arrived just before sunset. The youth pastor, Mark, greeted us with his usual smile. Too wide. Too fixed. He clapped his hands and reminded everyone of the rules. Stay together. Lights out after prayer. Do not leave the hall at night. Someone joked about ghosts. Mark didn't laugh. There's nothing funny about being disrespectful here, he said quietly. That should have been my first warning. The night started normally. We ate pizza. Played games. Laughed. Phones were taken to avoid distractions. Parents left. The doors were locked behind them. At 10 p.m., we gathered in the sanctuary for prayer. The lights were dimmed, stained glass windows casting dull shapes on the floor. Mark stood at the pulpit, hands folded, voice calm. Halfway through, I noticed something strange. The side doors were gone. Not open. Gone. Just smooth walls where they should have been. I nudged my friend Jenna and whispered about it. She frowned. They were there earlier, she said. Mark's prayer ended abruptly. Amen, he said. The lights went out. Total darkness. Someone laughed nervously. Then the emergency lights flickered on, faint, red-tinted, barely illuminating the room. Stay calm, Mark said. This happens sometimes. We were ushered back to the fellowship hall. Sleeping bags were already laid out. I noticed there were fewer of us now. I counted twice. 2 kids were missing. I asked Mark where they were. He smiled. They went home early. I knew that wasn't true. Parents couldn't come in after doors were locked. Lights out came fast. Too fast. As soon as the hall went dark, the temperature dropped. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Whispers started almost immediately. Kids murmuring, shifting in sleeping bags. Then came footsteps. Soft. Slow. Not Mark's. They moved along the walls, stopping near certain kids. I held my breath as the sound reached me, then passed. Someone whimpered. A hand squeezed mine. Jenna. Do you hear that? She whispered. Yes, I whispered back. A voice spoke from the darkness. Not Mark's. You're not supposed to talk after prayer. A flashlight flicked on briefly. I saw faces, pale, frozen, wide-eyed. And behind Mark stood someone else. An older man in a church robe I didn't recognize. His face looked wrong. Like it didn't quite belong to him. The light snapped off. The footsteps resumed. Then a zipper. Someone screamed. Lights on. One sleeping bag was empty. Mark stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. Bathroom break, he said quickly. Back to sleep. No one argued. No one moved. I didn't sleep. Neither did Jenna. At some point, I realized something worse. The building sounded full. Breathing. Shifting. Whispering beneath the floors. Like people were everywhere. At 3 a.m., the bell tower rang once. Every kid sat up at the same time. That's not scheduled, Mark muttered. The red emergency lights flickered again. This time, the side door to the hall creaked open. The older man stepped inside. I saw his face clearly now. It wasn't a face. It was a collection of faces. Lead. Stretched. Worn. We're missing one, he said. Mark swallowed. I'll choose, he said quietly. My blood went cold. He scanned the room. Eyes passed over me. Passed over Jenna. Then stopped. Jenna squeezed my hand harder. No, she whispered. The man nodded. Good, he said. She'll do. I screamed. Chaos erupted. Kids ran. Tripped. Cried. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, hands grabbed. Pulled. Separated. I felt Jenna ripped away from me. Her scream cut off suddenly. Then silence. When the lights came back on, the room was empty except for me and 3 others. Police arrived at sunrise. They found no signs of forced entry. No hidden rooms. No basement access. No missing adults. Mark was gone. So were 5 kids. The church closed quietly 2 months later. They said it was due to structural concerns. Years later, I drive past the property sometimes. The building is still there. Lights on. Full parking lot. But no sign. No name. And if you listen closely as you pass, you can hear singing. Children's voices. Perfectly in tune.